Have you ever come across one of those ideas that just stops you in your tracks? One that seems to pop up in two completely different places at two different times, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore today, one of the most fascinating philosophical puzzles out there. We're going to find out how a group of American rebels in the 1800s and some ancient Indian sages managed to land on the very same profound vision of reality. So take a look at this. On one side, from 19th century America, we have the Oversoul, and on the other, from ancient India, way back around 800 BCE, we have Brahman. Now, at first glance, they seem worlds apart, but the wild thing is, they're both pointing to the exact same concept, a single, all-encompassing, universal spirit that connects everything and everyone. The similarity is just uncanny, and that's the mystery we're here to unravel. So that leads us to the big question, right? How did this happen? How did these American thinkers, in a time long before you could just Google ancient philosophies, come up with an idea that so perfectly mirrors a tradition from the other side of the planet? This isn't just a coincidence, folks. It's a story of discovery, and it's a really good one. All right, to get to the bottom of this, we need to do a little detective work. We're going to trace the threads of this connection that somehow stretches across entire continents and centuries. Let's begin. So our journey is going to start way back in the philosophical schools of ancient India. Then we're going to jump across the globe and through time to the woods and towns of 19th century New England. First up, let's unpack the Indian side of this equation. We need to understand a philosophy called Advaita Vedanta, and the name itself gives us a massive clue. It literally means non-duality. Now, you have to understand, Advaita Vedanta isn't just some minor, obscure idea. It's considered the absolute pinnacle of India's 6 major schools of philosophy, which are known as the darshanas. Each darshana is like a different vision of reality, and Advaita is seen as the highest, most unifying vision of them all. At the very heart of Vedanta is this concept of Brahman. Now, try not to think of Brahman as some person or deity in the sky. It's more like the source code of the universe. It's the singular, infinite, and eternal consciousness from which everything, and I mean everything, arises. And then you have Atman. Atman is you. It's that personal sense of I that's listening to me right now. It's your individual consciousness, the soul that feels and thinks and experiences the world from your unique point of view. And here it is. This is the mic drop moment of Advaita Vedanta. A simple little equation with absolutely mind-bending implications. Atman equals Brahman. It's not saying your soul is like Brahman or a tiny piece of Brahman. It is saying that your individual consciousness is the universal consciousness. Fundamentally, there is no difference. I know, that's a huge idea to get your head around. So here's this brilliant modern analogy from a Reddit user that just nails it. Think about the electricity running through your house. You have a light bulb, a TV, a fridge. They all do different things, look different, but the electricity powering them is the exact same stuff. Well, in the same way, you and I might seem like separate people, but the consciousness animating us is one and the same. So the obvious question then is, if we're all one, why do we feel so separate? Vedanta explains this with a concept called adhyasa, which means superimposition. The idea is that our individual minds are constantly layering our perceptions, our memories, our biases onto raw reality. This creates an illusion of separation, a sort of veil of ignorance that makes us see a world full of different, separate things instead of the unified reality that's always there underneath. Okay, let's put a pin in that for a moment. Now, let's hop across the world and fast forward in time to 19th century New England, where a group of spiritual rebels were starting their own philosophical revolution. This was the era of the Transcendentalists. You know the names: Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau. These guys were basically rejecting the rigid rules of organized religion and society. They believed that true spiritual insight wasn't found in a church, but out in nature and by listening to your own intuition. Their writings from this time really set the stage for a new kind of American spirituality. And here is where it gets incredibly similar. Emerson comes up with this term, the Oversoul, and he describes it as a universal spirit that unites all of existence. He argued that each person's soul isn't just a part of this oversoul, but is actually identical to it. Sound familiar? This quote from Emerson's Self-Reliance just captures their whole vibe perfectly. The highest authority wasn't a book or a priest. It was your own gut feeling, your inner voice. And why? Because if your individual soul is the universal soul, then the deepest truths you find inside yourself must be universal truths. So we have these two philosophies from opposite ends of the earth that seem to be saying almost the exact same thing. Let's put them side by side and see how they really compare. Let's break this down, because the parallels are just wild. Under ultimate reality, Vedanta has Brahman, Transcendentalism has the Oversoul. Both are single universal spirit. Check. What about the individual self? Both agree it's identical to that universal spirit. Check. But look here, this is where they diverge. The path to knowledge. Vedanta relies on ancient scriptures and the guidance of a guru. The Transcendentalists championed personal intuition and connecting with nature. Their view of the world is also different. For Vedanta, the physical world is ultimately an illusion, Maya. For Transcendentalists, nature is the beautiful, real clothing of the divine. So, despite those differences, here's the crucial point. The idea where they meet and shake hands across the centuries. The individual self, the you inside, is ultimately identical to the universal spirit that runs the whole show. And this just sums up the fundamental split in their methods perfectly. Vedanta says you realize this truth by studying the ancient texts with a guide. Transcendentalism says you realize it by listening to your own heart and just looking at the world around you. It's like two different paths leading to the same breathtaking mountaintop. Okay, so this is a fascinating historical connection, but why does it matter to us right now? Well, as it turns out, this dialogue between East and West is more relevant today than ever. So toward the end of the 19th century, figures like Swami Vivekananda helped kick off a movement called Neo-Vedanta. It basically translated these deep Eastern ideas for a global audience, focusing on the universal principles. And that cross-pollination of ideas is still shaping our world. Think about the modern environmental movement and its view of nature as sacred. That has transcendentalist roots. Or think about our ongoing search for identity and meaning. It echoes that same Vedantic quest to understand our true self in a complicated world. Which leaves us with a final, fascinating question to chew on. The great Vedantic philosopher Sankara said, Brahman is real, the world is illusion. But Emerson claimed, nature always wears the colors of the spirit. One sees the world as a veil, a potential distraction. The other sees it as a perfect window to the divine. So, are they contradicting each other? Or are they just two different ways of trying to describe a truth that's maybe too big for words? That's a thought to ponder.